Hi RAs, welcome to our first webinar called Radio Training. Through this webinar, we're hoping that you get a better understanding in regards to how to use the radio while on duty. Now, this is just an informative webinar. When you have your first staff meeting, at your staff meeting, you'll be going over how to utilize the radio and any questions that you may have from this webinar, but this is a great resource for if you're having to go on duty for the first time and worried about how to utilize the radio. You can always look back on this webinar and be able to have a better understanding of how to utilize the radio. So let's just get right into it. So this is a picture of the radio. Now later in our video, we'll show you what an actual radio looks like and utilize the buttons that we will be talking about. But for now, we'll utilize this picture. So the first one is the power switch in volume. You're going to want to turn this button, and when you turn the button, it will make a beeping sound. Now, usually you'll hear dispatch on the other end speaking, especially during roll call, and so you'll be able to adjust the volume to your needs once roll call begins, and you can have a better understanding of the volume that you need. The other button that's important is the call button. Now this is the button that you're going to press down and keep pressing when you're speaking on the radio for when you're looking for the RD on duty or if you're looking for dispatch. Now, important to note, when you're using the call button, you're going to want to hold this down for a few seconds prior to speaking. If you don't hold the button down a few seconds, then you will get cut off and dispatch won't know potentially your location, who you are, and misinformation may get across the radio. And so it's very important to keep the button held down when you're speaking and then also leave a few seconds pause before you start speaking so that dispatch has a second to have an understanding of who's calling. The other button is the radio channel. You'll only utilize this at the beginning of your shift, and you're just going to want to make sure that you're on channel 1. This allows for both dispatch and for RDs on duties to hear you, and at the beginning, all you'll want to do is to make sure that it's on channel 1. If it's on channel 1, you'll keep it there. If not, then you'll just move it over to channel 1. And lastly, there's the microphone and speaker. Now this microphone and speaker is where you'll actually speak into in order for dispatch and the RD on duty to hear you. Now, unlike a walkie-talkie where you hold it very close to your mouth, you're going to want to keep this radio a few inches away from your mouth when you're speaking so that the dispatcher or the RD on duty can hear you clearly. Now, if you don't give that few inches, it's going to just come garbled, it's going to be unclear, and it's going to be very hard to get to that emergency. So it's important that you keep that radio a few inches away. Now for utilizing the radio. So for step 1, you're going to press the call button that we spoke about. You're going to pause for a few seconds, and then you're going to state your area and call code for who you're trying to contact. So an example of this, if you're an alumni des RA, you're going to say alumni des RAs to control. Now, if you're a Hill RA, what you would say is Hill RA to control. Or if you were trying to get to the RD on duty, you would say Hill RAs to R60. Now, the codes below, R60 is what we utilize for RDs on duty while we're using the radio, and then we use control for dispatch. Now, if you end up saying dispatch or RD on duty, they're going to understand and they're going to still respond. But as you get more comfortable with the radio, these are the codes that you'll be utilizing and the codes that other RAs will be utilizing as well. Now, step 2, after you're prompted from the respondent, which is either the RD on duty or control, in a clear and calm manner, you're going to state the reason why you're making the call. So for an example, you're going to say, I need an officer for an alcohol assessment on the first floor of alumni. Now, there's 2 important pieces to this. The alcohol assessment is very important, as any sort of assessment that's going to be needed. It's important for the officer to know that that's what they're getting into. And then also they need to know what floor you're on, what building. That's the other piece. The location is really important because if the officer doesn't know the location, they can't get to the emergency. And step 3 is you're going to wait for a response and say received. So for example, if the RD on duty or if control says copy, officer is on the way, or they may just say copy, but they'll always say something of that sort. You're going to say received. That is so that the RD on duty or control knows that you've gotten the message that they're on their way and that help is on the way. So when using the radio, when possible, step away from the situation and students to place the call. If you're making the call right in front of the students, they may start asking questions, and that may get sent over to the radio, to dispatch or to the RD on duty, and it may be difficult for them to understand what's going on. If there's commotion, they won't be able to hear you properly, and they'll only hear that background noise. So when possible, take a few steps back and be able to make that radio call. Now, you don't have to be down the hall or around the corner or anything like that. Just a few steps will make a huge difference in being able to understand what you're saying over the radio. Now, you're going to want to check the volume on your radio to make sure you'll be able to hear the response back to you. If it's very soft, then you always have the ability to turn the volume up. You'll also want to speak calmly and clearly, like we said earlier, so that the RD on duty or control has an understanding of what you're saying. And under no circumstances do we give student names over the radio. We don't give student names and we don't give student IDs. Individuals may have access to listening to what's going on over the radio besides campus police and residential life. And it's important that individuals can't link an incident to a specific student. And so you may be able to say that it's a female or a male that they're going to be responding to, but we don't say student names over the radio. And when in doubt whether or not to call for help, you always call. You always call. You want to utilize those instincts, and we need to make sure that we're getting to those emergencies that we need to. Now, whether you call for control or whether you call for the RD on duty, that necessarily doesn't matter as much as long as you're making the call. Because if it's supposed to be directed to dispatch and you ended up calling over for RD on duty, then we'll make sure that control knows about it and gets to the emergency. So we're going to do some radio practicing. Now, we'll also be doing some practice in behind closed doors as well during training, but this will be nice to do some of the practice in the comfort of your own home. So we're going to give you a scenario, and then we're going to give you a few seconds to try on your own, and then we're actually going to give you the correct response to the situations. So for the first situation, you're on a round in alumni. You come to the 3rd floor and find Tammy throwing up in the bathroom stall. When you check on her, you find out that she's had 3 shots, 2 cups of jungle juice, and 4 beers. She can't sit up on her own, and her speech is slurred. So for this scenario, try and figure out how you would respond over the radio. Once again, we'll give you a couple seconds to give that a try, and then we'll come back. So hopefully you were able to try either once or twice on your own. So now we'll give you the response that is given over the radio for this type of scenario.
Alumni Des RA to control.
Control, go ahead.
I need an officer for an alcohol assessment on the 3rd floor of Alumni Hall.
Copy, an officer is on their way.
Received.
So that is for an alcohol assessment. Now you check on her, it looks like she's had some alcohol, it looks like she's slurring her speech and having trouble, she was throwing up. Those are all signs of intoxication, and we need to get her assessed to find out if she needs proper treatment. And so what you said as far as the alcohol assessment, that's important. And then you also gave the location and the floor. So then when they get to the building, they also know where to head to in order to give Tammy that help. Now for our next scenario, you're on a round in Wachusett Hall. You hear commotion on the 2nd floor. Upon arriving, you find Sam, Ted, and John throwing punches. We're going to give you, again, a few seconds to practice the radio response of what you would say for this scenario, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're going to come back and give you the response that we're hoping that is said over the radio.
Wachusett RA to control.
Control, go ahead.
I need an officer for a physical altercation between 3 males on the 2nd floor of Wachusett Hall.
Copy. An officer is on their way.
Received.
So with that response, once again, we're giving that location. For this one, it is a physical altercation, and so the RA is going to give that information. And then instead of saying Sam, Ted, and John, even though we're just using very common names that it could be anybody on our campus, we're not using last names, we still only say 3 males. Now, it's great that the person said 3 males and not just there's a physical altercation, because any other details is really important. And so the fact that it's happening among 3 individuals and 3 males, the officer on their way can prepare themselves for what they're about to get into as well when you have that information. So if you don't have that information and you forget the amount or you don't say that, that's okay as well, but the more detail as far as a physical altercation on how many people, and if someone's hurt, those are all important. If there's a weapon, any of those things is important when you're doing a radio call, especially with a physical altercation. Now our third scenario is you have just cleared a party out of 6H in the Valley, and there are 100+ students now lingering outside the tower. You have already told everyone to leave the Valley, but they're not budging, and they're still socializing outside in the quad of the Valley. We'll give you a few seconds to have your response of what you would say over the radio, and then we'll come back as well. Okay, so we're going to come back and give you our response that we're hoping with the radio.
Valley RA to control.
Control, go ahead.
I need an officer for crowd control near 6H.
Copy. An officer is on their way. So for this one, it has more to do with crowd control. There's no altercation. We just need some more help in having a little bit more visibility with being able to send people back to their areas. And so it's important for them to know around the area of where individuals are at. If you didn't know the 6H or the apartment, saying that they're in the quad of the Valley or being able to give some descriptions, that's good as well. And they're saying a large crowd is good. You don't know how many students, and so you can't really give a number, but saying a large crowd for 100+ students is really, really helpful. So for our last scenario, you are on a round of the 3rd floor of Young Hall, and you smell the strong odor of marijuana when you pass by room 317. Once again, we'll give you a few seconds to be able to practice what you would say, and we'll come back to give you the response that we have. Okay, so for this scenario, this is the response that we're hoping over the radio.
Hill RAs to control.
Control, go ahead.
I need an officer for the odor of marijuana on the 3rd floor of Young Hall.
Copy. An officer is on their way.
Received.
So for that one, it's important again, like we said, the location. This one has to do with possible marijuana, so the response may be different than if there was an alcohol or medical or physical altercation. And so those are important things to say as well, that it had to do with marijuana and the location. Now from here, we're going to show you the actual radio. We'll show you the video with the radio, and we'll be able to go into detail about those aspects of it. Hi RAs, this is Carrie Wren and this is Maggie Keach, and we're here, just like we said in the webinar at the beginning, that we were going to show you an actual RA radio so that you would have a better understanding of how to utilize it when you're on duty. Maggie is going to go over the radio buttons and describe them and give more information on them, and then we will do a test run of the radio for you.
Okay, so as we showed you, in the front there's the speaker, and that it's also where you speak into the phone, so that's where the microphone is. So make sure we're keeping it a few inches from our face when we're speaking into it, and making sure the volume is up when we're trying to listen. So this is the power button. It also is the volume button, so when you turn it on, you'll hear a little beep. So I'm going to turn it up halfway because that's a good volume for me. So over here is the channel button. In our webinar, it says keep it on channel 1, but your radios don't actually have channel numbers. So just try not to touch this button, and the officers will usually let you know if you're on an opposite channel. And either the RD will come help you or campus police will come help you. So basically, this is the call button right here. It's hard to see in this lighting, but you kind of can see the dots and the ridges. So this button, you're going to hold for at least 3 seconds to make sure that the officer can actually hear you. So holding the button a little bit far away from your face, 3 seconds, and then speak calmly and clearly. So Carrie's going to be the RA in the situation, and I'm going to be the RD. So you won't see me. I'm going to be in the other room on my radio, and Carrie will be on this radio.
Great job, Max. Alumni Des RA to R60.
R60, go ahead.
We are just doing a test for webinar radio training. Thank you.
Received.
So, like we showed, this was a good volume. Maggie was right. About halfway through was a right volume for this radio. It does vary between radios, and so you're just going to have to find the volume that's right for you for the evening. And you can change and adjust the volume throughout the night. What you can't change, though, is the channel. So you want to make sure that you're really not touching that button. And like Maggie said, if you are on the wrong channel, a dispatcher will let you know that you need to go back onto the right channel. So this is the end of our webinar and our training. If you have any questions about how to utilize the radio, when to utilize the radio, you can speak to your RD, especially with radio training. The more times you use it, the better you're going to get at utilizing it. Have a great day.